Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5-Yard Dynasty podcast. I am your host. I am back after a 2-week hiatus. It is Liam at the FSA Tweets on Twitter. As you can tell, my setup is slightly different. I've just gone through moving house, so no external mic. My internet cuts out, and we're on a temporary one, so that might be why things get a bit spotty. But I've got Rich back. It's the first time in at least 2 weeks. It might even be 3, Rich, that we're back on a pod together. So how are you doing, mate? How's your playoffs going?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you, mate. It was lovely Christmas. I think it's 4 weeks because I think we've not done the last 3 shows together. So yeah, been a while, but yeah, good to have you back. Glad to have you back on. Glad the move's gone well, and looking forward to having a talk through the week.
Well, let's get started, mate. So as usual, we will start with the highest scorers of the week. We'll start off with quarterbacks. So for those of you that are new, that don't listen to the show as often, we go through the highest scorers of the week, and we use 4-point touchdowns for quarterbacks or PPR for every other position. As I said, we'll start off at quarterbacks. So that is Dak Prescott with just 30 points, 28.98 points as our QB1 on the week. And then Jared Goff and Joe Burrow with around 25.5 points coming in at QB2 and 3 respectively. Moving over to the running back position, Rich, we've got Cam Akers with a monster nearly 35 points. Looks like he's coming back strong now. He looks like he's getting a bit healthy, and maybe we wrote him off a little bit too early in terms of getting a bit down on him early on in the season, coming back from that Achilles injury. But Rich, a guy that were both high on having a comeback year, Saquon Barkley coming in as running back 2 on the week with 27.3 points, and Leonard Fournette with just over 25 points comes in at running back 2. So just circling back to Saquon Barkley, Rich. As I said, in the preseason, we were both extremely high on Barkley having a great year. We both said that he had a wide range of outcomes. He could be the running back 1 overall. He also could fade into irrelevancy if he had another big injury. Looks like it went the other way, and we did get that top end ceiling. Rich, he's been amazing. So 27.3 points on this week.
Yeah, he's had a little bit of a poorer run of form, should we say, of late. So it's nice to get him back and helping people win titles, isn't it? I think I'm really fascinated to see how his value is going to go through the offseason, because this is a guy that he was I think he was the RB1, if not a top 5 running back in his rookie season. Had incredible production in his second year before he got injured. And then it's basically had 2 years where he battled injury and didn't really do anything. He's back this year with a bang. He's RB5 on the season, but he is an impending free agent. I think that the Giants are probably going to franchise him, but who's going to be the quarterback in New York? Are they going to invest on that interior of the offensive line? Like, there's a lot of question marks there. And I'm fascinated. Is he going to be held up as a top 3, top 4 dynasty running back, given the fact he's been in the league 5 years, he's not a spring chicken anymore? Or are we going to see him kind of drift down into that sort of Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Mix and Henry, those sort of aging veterans? He's sort of the one, shall I say, shining light in between the young upstarts, your Breece Halls and Kenny Walkers, and your aging veterans, and this sort of Saquon in the middle there. So do you have any thoughts on where he's going to go in the offseason? Do you have any thoughts on potentially his value at all, Liam? Or?
Yeah, so circling back to his rookie season, he was the running back 1 overall in PPR. Standard, he was running back 2, so he had a brilliant season either way, regardless of the scoring system you're in. Coming on to the dynasty value, I think that with his perceived youngness, and I'm saying that because he came into the league very young. I mean, he would be 26 at some point next year. No one really seems to talk about that age as an issue for him. No one ever says, okay, Saquon Barkley, he's aging like the Christian McCaffreys of the world in that era, like Alvin Kamara and Aaron Jones. So I think you could still probably get quite a bit for him. And I think because of that, you're also going to see him go higher in startups than I'm going to be willing to pay. I can see him going running back 2 to 3 in that range. Maybe you'll see guys like Brees Hall. He'll probably go around that Brees Hall, Kenneth Walker range where they're not quite the running back 1 overall, but they're the next best. And I think that's what we'll probably see. And this kind of goes back to a thing that I was saying halfway through the season where it might be time where we start looking at running backs as a win now and a rebuild kind of list and have 2 different sets of rankings for those aging players and those rebuild players that are going to last.
Yeah, so I mean, Saquon, he was RB2 in DLF December ADP, so he's already being valued up at that range. And I just wonder if, as you said, this is potentially that last sell now window, isn't it? If you're looking to regain maximum roster value, sell at peak, this is probably your last off season to sell, because I think it's only heading one way after, in next season as such in terms of his value.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be another peak like this, but Rich, let's move on. Another guy that you were extremely high on in the off season was wide receiver 1 on this week. CD Lamb, and then Devontae Smith came at wide receiver 2, and Justin Jefferson wide receiver 3. So names we kind of imagine are going to be around that top 3 mark in any given week. But CD Lamb wide receiver 1 on this week. Rich, I'm just going to let you talk about your boy because I'm not going to spoil your party like that.
I mean, he's been nothing but incredible, as he pretty much all year. He's approaching that 30% target share. He's at 28.9. That's held up as superstars, and he's been fantastic. Wide receiver 6 on the season. Been very reliable. Got a great connection with Dak, and it is still young enough that there's potential upside and potential ceiling that he's yet to reach. He's climbed up to my wide receiver 3. He's jumped ahead of AJ Brown now, and I think that there's potentially, he's really the only guy in the NFL currently that you could see approaching that Jefferson Chase tier, isn't it? I don't know if there's anyone else that's got that potential. If he has another 150 plus target year next year, maybe the Cowboys offense shifts slightly towards a pass first more and slightly less run orientated than it's been this year, there's still room for him to kind of grow in terms of his fantasy potential. So yeah, it's been fantastic as a guy that owns a copious amount of CD Lamb shares. It's been lovely to see this year.
Yeah, he has been incredible, and I think that the big thing for CD is he's been sneaky incredible. I don't think many people have kind of been talking about how quite good he is. I mean, I was quite down on him to start the year, and then all of a sudden I've kind of come around on him for 180, and
yeah, I mean, he's not. I think
the
thing is he's not had those massively boom top 5 weeks. So if you look at it, he's actually only had 2 top 5 weeks, whereas a guy like Justin Jefferson has had 9. But the difference is that he's also had 9 top 24 weeks. And I think that's it. Is that yes, CD Lamb's not been Justin Jefferson this year, but he's just been reliable and consistent, and there's not been many weeks that he's completely burnt you, which there's a lot of receivers outside of Justin Jefferson that have certainly done that.
So Rich, moving over to tight ends, have said this isn't tight end premium. So that is TJ Hawkinson as tight end one, had a 2-touchdown game, knocked me out of one of my playoffs. Tyler Higbee then with just over 30 points, tight end 2, and then George Kittle, tight end 3 with bang on 30 points. Rich Kittle's got a good 2-game stretch going, but we've seen weeks where 15 points has got tight end 1 wrapped up. So to have some big scores at the tight end position, pretty nice for once.
Yeah, tight end's been such a wild position this year, hasn't it? Outside of Kelsey, sorry, he's the only one who's been a reliable fantasy option week in, week out. I think, I think I tweeted out the other day the difference between Kelsey as tight end 1 and what was Andrews at tight end 2 is the same as the difference between Andrews and like tight end 30. Hawkinson's actually jumped ahead of Andrews now as the tight end 2. I think that move for the Vikings has been fantastic. It's certainly unleashed him. And is it worth having the conversation? Is Hawkinson creeping into that top tier of dynasty tight ends? Are we ready to throw him in the same stratosphere as Andrews, Kelsey, and Pitch? He's outproduced 2 of them this year. Does he deserve to be held up there?
I think the issue we're going to see with Hawkinson is he's quite up and down, and I think a lot of people don't expect the tight end position to be so up and down, but he really has been. But the same could be said for guys like Kittle. Like Kittle's had either over 10 points or near enough under 5 points every week he's been back. He's had some incredible games, but he's also burnt you in a lot of places. If we look at Hawkinson's game, if we look at Hawkinson's game log, you're looking at, you've got 2 over 35 point games, you've got a 15 point game, and then you've got a bunch of 11s, 10s, or lower than that. So I think with tight end, you might even just be looking for high end ceiling at this point rather than the constant 10 to 15 points, because I don't think any tight end outside of the top 2 like Kelsey and Andrews, you're not going to get that consistency out of anyone else. And even Andrews, you could argue, hasn't really been consistent this season.
He's killed teams down the stretch, hasn't he? There's plenty of playoff teams that I've got Andrews that have done nothing because you're relying on him giving you that positional advantage, and he's been pretty. Yes, there's been quarterback issues and changes, but he's been horrific for fantasy the last few weeks.
Yeah, so you are struggling a little bit at tight end, regardless of who you have, unless it's Kelsey. And I think that it's tough to call it a top 5 right now. It's top 1, Kelsey, and then there's maybe a top 4, a following 5 or 6 players that you could probably slot in around that. But I know not a lot of people like tight ends, so let's move on, Rich, before we bore more of our listeners. Next up, we've got the significant news. So, if you didn't know, it is the championship week. If you do have any teams in the championships, good luck. It's also the Toilet Bowl consolation bracket, Toilet Bowl consolation bracket championships. I don't really know. I don't pay attention if I get into any of those. I kind of just set my light up and that's it. So if you are in any of those championships to try and win the league, good luck, but you're going to need to stay here to listen to this significant news so we can keep you updated if you do have any of these players. First up, Aaron Jones. He's still dealing with that ankle injury from week 9. I can't imagine anyone not starting him unless you have an insanely stacked roster. So you're just probably going to see a dip in volume like you have been seeing for the past few weeks. You're just hoping he gets into the end zone. Jamal Williams, knee injury, also could be an MCL. No one really knows. The team hasn't really given much information about that. But he did return back to the game this week, so just double check his practice report, and that's going to be a running theme for this week. Christian Watson left the game with a hip injury, didn't return, so he's described as day-to-day as well. Again, check your injury reports going through the week. Tyler Lockett could be back this week. Check your injury reports. He broke his thumb, finger, one of them, but it looks like he's getting to the end of that stage, so he should be back. And Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, both could be back this week. Just monitor those practice reports, those injury reports. Some big news: Rich Tua Tagovailoa had another concussion. I mean, I didn't catch it in person when I was watching, but or in live when it was playing. But it's just an interesting one. This is a third concussion on the season. He does need to clear the protocol to play. But Rich, where do you go with Tua right now?
I think, look, he's kind of slightly radioactive in terms of this season. I think that whenever a player, look, concussions are a really serious issue, and whenever a player is having a third concussion in a season, I think we need to start getting serious concerns. And I think that, obviously we had the issue with Miami, him, whether it be the NFL doctors or whatever, he didn't get a concussion, but then he did. And then he played the following week and got another concussion. And, that was horrific earlier in the season. Hopefully he's all right now with this third concussion. But I think that we've got 2 weeks left in the season. The Dolphins are playing the Patriots this week, and they've got the Jets next week. That's their kind of season on the line, basically. They need to win one of those 2 games in order to make the playoffs. I don't know whether we're going to see Tua. Definitely, I'd be gobsmacked if we saw him this week, and I'd be shocked if we saw him next week, because I think when you're getting to that third concussion in a season, the team almost need to be doing what's best for Tua and saying, right, you're done for the season. If we make the playoffs, you can play then. But let's seriously, it's not just about clearing concussion protocol, because they've said just because a player clears the protocol doesn't mean they've overcome their concussion. That can take weeks or 2 weeks. It's a reduced risk of re-injury in terms of the concussion. So yeah, I think if you've got Tua this year, you're probably looking at, you're not going to use him again this year from fantasy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one in terms of, will the team actually do what's right for the player? If you're being sensible about it, I can't imagine to replace the next 2 weeks. But it's the NFL. I really don't know whether he'll play or not. But Rich, last little bit of before we get to the last little bit of news, I noticed that you also wanted to talk a bit about Tyler Lockett, but I was in a flow, so I just flew through all those practice injury reports. So what did you want to say on Tyler Lockett, so I don't skip over it?
Just one, I think, from a fantasy perspective, probably write him off this week. I think I'd be shocked if he did come back. He had surgery on a broken finger or thumb or whatever it was. It seems remarkably quick to recover and play. They're also going up against the Jets. Now, the Jets have got lots of faults, but I think the secondary is very good, and I'd be shocked if Lockett is going to be a plug and play this week.
Yeah, nothing more to add there. But while we're on the Jets, Rich, I want to get your opinion on this. Mike White is back in as the starting quarterback. Zach Wilson has been benched, and not even to the backup spot, but one further, and he's now actually going to be inactive during the game, and it's Flacco that he's going to be backing up. So, yeah, Rich, I want to get your opinions as a Jets fan on this and for fantasy.
Zach Wilson's days in New York are done, I think. I think if the Jets can't trade him in the offseason, I think they're going to release him. I think he's played poorly, but I think his press conference and the way he's carried himself has kind of done more of the damage, quite frankly. I think he's now not welcome basically in the locker room. So I think, hopefully from a Jets perspective, we can get maybe a day 3 pick from him for some team taking a flyer. But I think he's now basically done.
Rich, let's move over to the Dynasty stock market, and I'll throw it over to you to tell us the first riser you've got on your list.
Yeah, you might have to bear with me. I'm currently dying in the background, so I'll try and get this through this as quickly as possible. So you hinted on him earlier. Cam Akers, obviously huge performance, running back 1 on the week. He's naturally, his value is going to go up. People are going to start talking about whether he's, the running back to own in Los Angeles moving forwards. Hopefully this offense is going to take a step forwards when, Cup's back, when we're going to see Allen Robinson, Matt Stafford, all of that kind of thing. Hopefully a healthy offensive line. I'm still hesitant whether Cam Akers is the long-term running back. I think, they tried to trade and they tried to give him away just before the trade deadline. I can't believe that they're suddenly going to be like, right, this is the guy for us long term. So I do think they potentially bring somebody in, whether it be draft or free agency, to at least compete with him. But if you were able to buy super low, if you were able to, ride the value wave, then I think for me, I'd probably sell for any second round pick. But there is potential that he could, if you continue to hold him, that value is only going to go up.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on this. I struggle to value him as a lead back because every year he's been in the Rams system. They've never trusted him fully with the ball. I mean, he's got up to 70% snaps a few times in a few games, but you've had guys like Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson that they've cut, and guys like Kyron Williams taking snaps and opportunities away from him. Yes, he's never going to have 100% snaps and 100% opportunity as a running back, but it's kind of concerning that these guys aren't just taking a little bit; they're taking a significant amount from occasions. So I struggle with Cam Akers. I really liked him pre-draft, and then his price skyrocketed into early mid-round, first round in the rookie draft. So I was out at that point, and it's just a shame for a guy that I kind of liked, and then all of a sudden, since that has happened, I've never agreed with his price until he had the Achilles injury. Then I was kind of a bit I was sniffing around him in a few leagues, but I never got anything. But Rich, who's your second riser for this week?
So the second one is, I think, a sneaky under the radar rookie that isn't getting talked about enough. So Jahan Dotson, he had a fantastic start to the season. He then hurt his hamstring in week 4 and kind of disappeared a bit, and then has come back and had a couple of really good weeks and put up over 20 points this week. But he's had 5 of his 9 performances. He's put up over 13 fantasy points. And a little quiz question for you here, Liam. Rookie wide receivers points per game. Where do you think Jahan Dotson currently ranks? Don't check and look.
I'm already checking and looking, so I feel bad.
That's just cheating.
I mean, it was cheating, but I didn't realize this was going to be a question for me. When I saw wide receiver question mark on the show sheet, I kind of thought you were still trying to find it, so I thought I was trying to be helpful. I'm going to say, with the type of games he's played, 3 or 4, but I'm looking through now, or have been looking through, and I can't see him at the top, Rich.
Yeah, so I mean, these questions are easy when you cheat, aren't they? So, yeah, look, this is a guy that was the consensus, wide receiver 8 in terms of rookie drafts. So you had the other 5 first rounders, and then you had Sky Moore, Christian Watson, and then in some places George Pickens going ahead of him. So he was wide receiver 8, wide receiver 9. He's currently the wide receiver 4 in points per game. The only players that have outproduced him from a fantasy perspective are Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Christian Watson. He is ahead of Drake London. as in just rookies. Yeah, he is ahead of Drake London. He is ahead of George Pickens. He's ahead of Romeo Doubs, Traylon Burks, Wandale Robinson, Alec Pierce. Miles ahead of Sky Moore. Obviously, Jameson Williams has been injured, but like you name it, rookie wide receivers, they are behind Jahan Dotson. And we sophomore wide receivers are like the holy grail, aren't they, in terms of a dynasty offseason? You watch this offseason, everybody is going to be talking about trying to acquire Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Traylon Burks, George Pickens. All of those guys are going to get lumped into that hat as a must buy, and it feels like nobody's talking about Jahan Dotson. And I know you take the mick and say that, because I always said that he was in the big six rather than the big five, and I stand by that. And I think that the talent's there, the draft capital's there. He's going to get a better quarterback. Now, look, I can look into my crystal ball and have no idea who they're going to be, but I can tell you whoever they end up starting under center on week 1 next year is going to be better than Taylor Heineke. He's going to be better than Carson Wentz. So, yeah, the Commanders could potentially move on from Curtis Samuel as well. They say $5 million if they release him at the end of the year. So I think there is room to grow for Jahan Dotson. And yeah, at the moment, nobody's talking about him. You can probably get him for what, late first, early second, something like that. Maybe you can, pivot off another guy to go and get Jahan Dotson. I think he's a really, really sneaky under the radar must buy at the moment.
Here's a quick question for you, Rich. When he has played over 60, we'll go with over 70% of snaps, what do you think his lowest position on the week was? His lowest ranking on the week was when he played over 70% of snaps.
So I know he's had 5 top 24 weeks. So I'm going to say 22.
You're not far off, I'll give you that. Wide receiver 20.
Yeah, so
and
if he's going to step into a full-time role next year,
over 70% of snaps, 5 weeks.
So if he's going to step into a full-time role in his second year in the league, it's only that could be massive for him, couldn't it?
I will caveat that and say he scored a touchdown in every single one of those weeks, and he has scored a touchdown in all his games apart from week 3, and then a stretch between week 10 and week 12 where he had a combined 2 catches through those 3 weeks.
Are we docking Christian Watson for the same amount of? Are we docking Christian Watson the same amount for the amount of touchdowns he scored and how his fantasy production is?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Is both of these wide receivers, I mean, we weren't talking about Christian Watson, but we may as well now. Both of these wide receivers have been extremely touchdown dependent. They've both got 7 touchdowns on 35 or less receptions. And they've both got under 500 yards. Christian Watson currently 4 yards under that point, but both are touchdown dependent. But I don't know whether the fantasy community has really caught up to that. And I think that we've seen from Jahan Dotson that he doesn't need to be touchdown dependent. Last week really showed that when he's given 9 targets, he can go for 76 yards. He had a 105-yard game in week 15. He can do these things. Same with Christian Watson. It's just putting it all together. And as you said, I think Jahan Dotson is still the odd one out of no one really talking about him. And he's probably the one that you could sneakily add to your roster rather than a Christian Watson who has blown up headlines and with his triple touchdown game and guys like Chris Olave who has been extremely consistent over the course of this season. Rich, who have you got as your faller for this week?
So my faller, I think it's less about him and more about the situation around him and potential injuries, and it's DeAndre Hopkins. And I had one of my patrons message me and ask me and say, "Is DeAndre Hopkins done as a fantasy stud?" And my immediate reaction was like, "No, of course not. He's 31. I think he's 30, but he's going to be 31 in the offseason." It's like, no, he's going to have time left. And then I went back and looked at it, and I was like, okay, so he was a massive buy in the offseason for me. I kept screaming it everywhere I could. He's been a wide receiver, top 12 wide receiver in terms of points per game this year. Fantastic. But this last week he was rubbish without Kyler. And okay, we talked about the Kyler injury and potentially the impact that would have. Kyler's gone at the end of the year because of this ACL injury. I don't think we see Kyler next year. There's potential that when the injury is to get him, the amount of money they've invested in him, if he comes back kind of mid-season. But if there's a potential world where Cliff Kingsbury's gone, they have a new regime, okay, we're not going to rush Kyler back. Let's have a slow first year under the new regime, and we'll build for 2024. Kyler comes back healthy, and let's go from there. Well, do you want to keep DeAndre Hopkins on the roster if you've not got a quarterback? They can save like 5-6 million by releasing him at the end of the year. They could potentially trade him. 8 million. Well, there you go. They could potentially trade him and save even more. And I'm nervous about a 31-year-old potentially moving home, or best case scenario, if he stays in Arizona, who's he catching passes from? What? Maybe Andy Dalton, maybe Jacoby Brissett, maybe I don't know who else is Colt McCoy. None of those excite me. And he's currently being held up as a top 30 wide receiver in DLF ADP. And I just wonder if this offseason people are going to, the reverse of the John Dotson thing, everybody's going to come to a realization and go, oh, DeAndre Hopkins is old. He's not got a quarterback. Why are we valuing him this high? So I reckon you probably need to be selling right now. And I think I would take pretty much any 2023 second for him right now. I don't think you need to sell that low. I think you could get an early second for him. But yeah, I think you need to be moving on, certainly.
Yeah, I hate that you put this on the show sheet because DeAndre Hopkins killed me in a matchup against you in the fantasy playoffs in the Dynasty listener or Dynasty League of Listeners, which is the 16-team league that you run, Rich, where I lost by 1.4 points and Hopkins had one catch for 4 yards on 10 targets. So I know you put that in there just so I'd mention it, but that hurt my core. Yeah, I think with Hopkins it's a tough one because he can produce in most situations, and it's just the unknown that you've been saying that has really made me think actually he could be done and it could be time to move on. Because looking at his contract, Rich, if he is designated as a post-June 1st cut, they would actually save $19.5 million on the cap. He costs them nearly 31 million on the cap. That's an incredible figure for a wide receiver. And I know that he's a top wide receiver, but they've just traded for Marquise Brown. I don't know what his contract situation is, but they've just traded a first round pick for Hollywood. So are they going to really keep DeAndre Hopkins for that amount of price? Okay, I've just looked at the contract for Hollywood, and Hollywood Brown's contract is 13 million cap hit, and it's fully guaranteed because it's his 5th-year option. So are you going to keep those two on your roster for a combined nearly 45 million? I don't think so. And as you said, if he moves on, where does he go to? Is he going to actually stay as that stud? I think he can do. I think he's got the talent, but that unknown for me kind of pulls that away. So do you think that you could maybe try and squeeze out a 23 first from a fantasy
I think if you'd have made
finals?
I think if you'd have made that realization 2 weeks ago before the Kyler injury, I think you definitely could have got a late first for him. I think that sadly, with Kyler gone, having put up a complete dud week, I don't think any contender is willing to go, you know what, I'm going to send my first round pick, my one last move I can make before the final, to go and get a DeAndre Hopkins who's just laid a complete egg. So I think sadly, you're needing, you can almost, you could potentially play this as a, right, you're going to throw your toys out the pram. DeAndre Hopkins has cost you a title because he, laid an egg in the semi-final. You don't want him on your roster. Whereas actually what you're doing is you're looking ahead and going, I think his dynasty value is going to plummet. I'm going to sell now. So yeah, I think that you need to be at least exploring that market, because it could be that the bottom falls out very quickly in terms of his price.
So, Rich, let's move on to the player of the week. First up, I'll start with a guy that I've already kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, which is Devonta Smith. He was the wide receiver two, on this week with 31.3 points. I wanted to go a little more into depth with him because I think he's been, again, sneaky good. Yes, he's had those boom weeks and those bust weeks, and he's been a little bit inconsistent. With AJ Brown also being there. But in the last 4 games, Rich, he has had more than 10 points in each of those games in PPR. And I know that this is an arbitrary dead or point that we need to hit. 10 points seems to be consistency, but 10 points is always going to be good. And over the past 4 weeks where he scored over 10 points, he's been the wide receiver 3 in PPR over 4 weeks. I think that is something that's completely gone under the radar. He's had 8 targets in all but one of his games since the week 7 bye. So that's over the past 9 weeks of play. There's only been one game where he's had less than 8 targets, and that was a game where he had 2 targets. And then this week, just coming back, he scored 31 points, and in that game, he had 12 targets, which matched his season high targets of 12. So I think this is a guy that is still being a little bit undervalued. Maybe if you're talking to the Devonta Smith owner, they are already aware of how good he's been this season. Maybe you can catch someone sleeping, and this is a sneaky buy of someone that I still think has that incredible upside, as we've seen this week, wide receiver 2, but has also been it will have won you matchups, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think he's, there's nothing not to love, is there? He's a stud. The only thing is that potentially there's some weeks where he's going to disappear if it's an AJ Brown week. But look, I think he's fantastic. I think he's been fantastic. I think, the concern about him coming out was his size. He's proof that doesn't matter. The touchdown he scored on the weekend was, he was on the field and AJ Brown was taken off because they went with their blocking receiver package, and he's one of the best blockers in terms of the Philadelphia receiver corps. So that shows that size isn't a problem at all. Really impressed with him, and I like the idea of still almost going to kind of buy high off the back of it. So my player of the week, Liam, I sit here and I've slated volume-based RB2s for years. That sort of plodder that, David Montgomery's pretty much the epitome of this. A guy that isn't exactly exciting, doesn't, send shivers down your spine when you put him in your starting lineup and get your juices flowing. Because I think that running back 2 production can be replaced. So why go and spend up for a David Montgomery or someone like that, in whether it be in a startup or a trade, when you can kind of cobble together similar level production as him with volume-based plays, whether it be drafting 10 guys at the end of your draft and waiting for injuries and that kind of thing. Having said all that, the guy, my player of the week, is a volume-based RB2, and it's Devin Singletary. Now, the reason I've been really impressed and want to talk about him is that he doesn't come with that RB2 price tag. He was RB36 in DLF December ADP. he's been really cheap all year. I've wrote him up a couple of times in my DLF articles. He's currently the RB 18 on the season. He's coming off another top 24 back week. He's averaging 12 points per game. And he's just been so steady, reliable. You know what you're going to get. He's never going to win you a week, but he won't lose you the week. And I think that if you can have that as a flex bait, it's been really impressive. Now, the question I have is that when these things tend to happen is you get to the end of the year, he's probably going to finish, shall we say, somewhere in like the running back 16 to 20 range. Everyone's going to look back in January, February time and go, oh, Devin Singletary was an RB2. Let's draft him as that moving forward. And I think that that's the time that you then potentially look to sell. He is a free agent in the end of the year. The Bills have just gone and spent a second-round pick on James Cook. I think that they're going to look at shifting this backfield more towards James Cook than potentially bringing back someone like a Devin Singletary. But he's been really good this year. And the only people that probably realise how good he's been have been the guys that have been rostering him. So, wait for the rest of the world to wake up, catch up to say Devin Singletary's been good for fantasy. And that's when perhaps you look to make that move and sell him.
I think the surprising thing about Singletary is he's had 4 running back 1 weeks, which I didn't expect from him. I've always, as you said, seen him as that volume-based running back. He's always been that kind of boring option that doesn't seem to have that ceiling. And yet he was the RB4 in week 3 against Miami. He was the RB7 last week. And then he's had an RB 10 and 12 week back to back in 10 weeks, 10 and 11. So he's got that upside. The worry for me is that free agency. We've not seen it during his rookie career or his rookie contract that he's been trusted enough to have the full backfield. They've always had a second or even a third back in that backfield. They traded for Naeem Hines, which was a bit weird. So I don't know what that says about their confidence towards him. But what I wanted to say on him, and sorry to kind of hijack your player of the week, but I kind of wanted to spin it to the other guy in your in the backfield, and that's James Cook you mentioned, because he could be the only running back in this backfield going forward. I mean, Devin Singletary is a free agent. Naeem Hines is a guy that has a 0 dead cap going forward. So if they don't feel, the Bills don't feel like they got anything from him this season, or don't feel like he's going to do much next year, they could save just under $5 million in space and go and get a rookie. So I think that with a pinch of salt, James Cook, I don't think is going to ever become a full workhorse, because that's not what the Buffalo Bills do. But I think that James Cook is a sneaky buy right now. Or sneaky buy high, I suppose. It's not very high, but he has been playing well, and people's opinions have left the first touch in the NFL being a fumble behind and have started to see him as an up-and-coming rookie. I think that you could buy on that, and you could be a bit more consistent, and essentially become the next Devin Singletary with a bit of a more consistent higher upside. But coming back on Devin Singletary, I think that he's been incredible for people this season who have essentially had him for near nothing. Even when a lot of the fantasy community were quite out on Devin Singletary, Rich.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Rich, I'm just going to give an update on this because neither of us have a player for the flex-off competition. Because of my 2-week hiatus, I left after winning the week 14 matchup, which was Donta Foreman, was scoring 8.5 points, which is Rich's player, versus Donovan Peoples-Jones, who Rich spoke about. Was it last week or the week before, Rich? It's all molding into one for me at the moment, but over the past 2 weeks, with just under 20 points. So at the end of the season, we ended up with 6 points to me to 5 to Rich's 5. I'm not going to dwell on that too much because Rich has some important news that I'm going to just hand over to him and let him do the speaking from now on.
Yeah, so today is my final day with 5 Yard. It's my final Dynasty podcast. We'll be doing together, Liam. Sadly, hopefully I'm sure we'll join back on in the future and do some pods. But yeah, so I'm incredible. Thank you to Stocks and Murph and all the guys. Took a chance on me and we started this up just over 2 years ago now. It's been a great ride. It's been great fun. Learned a lot. Hopefully helped people win championships. But yeah, so I'm going to be moving on. Couple of big ventures planned for me in the off season that I will be. So one, I've got my rookie draft guide, which will be dropping. The first edition will be dropping in end of January, with kind of updates as the off season goes on. And then I've got another announcement that will probably be dropping about mid January on Twitter. So yeah, if you're not following me, come and jump on there.
Rich teasing all of the new stuff. But yeah, Rich, it's been a pleasure. I never thought this day would come, but here it is. The last final 5 Yard Dynasty pod with both of us on it. I'm glad I could be back for the final one. I wasn't decorating the new house, but yeah, it's been a pleasure. And I'm going to say one final thank you for bringing me onto the show, because this was the first podcast I ever did back in, it would have been March, April, May, sometime in that time, 2021. Hyped up a bit of Nico Collins and Amari Rogers, and I kind of regret Amari Rogers now, even though he was my guy from that rookie class. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. And for one last time, Rich, feel free to do the sign off. I know that this wasn't planned, but you deserve it.
No, thank you very much. It's been a fantastic 2 years, Liam. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for putting up with me as long as you have. And hopefully, guys, we will hear about your titles that you're going to win over the coming week. But we'll see you again soon, and take care.